If you've ever been a Windows user for any amount of time, you've probably heard a lot of good things coming from the Mac camp. I mean, MacBook users will swear by their device's hardware and experience, justifying the higher price tag with the same kind of intangibles and refinements that Apple is so well known for in the rest of its product lineup. And as a Windows user myself who has studied these mythical beings from afar, I'd be lying if I said that I haven't been tempted. But then I finally took the plunge into the MacBook world when we finally got our hands on the brand new MacBook Pro 16. So, is the grass truly greener on the other side? Like, is the MacBook land the utopia that all laptop users should move to? And can a longtime Windows user like myself really make the switch? Well, I guess that there's only one way to find out. With a video like this, I think the best way to answer the question is to break it down into what I liked, what I didn't like, and what I think really doesn't make that much of a difference. And we'll start with what I liked, because as the promised land promised, there is quite a lot to like here. Most of it, however, lies in the hardware because, oh my goodness, Apple knows how to make a well-built machine. This particular MacBook Pro 16 I spent my week with simply felt better put together than pretty much every Windows laptop I have ever had the chance to use. Its build alone is enough to blow most PC machines out of the water. Every seam, every little corner feels like it was machined in a hermetically sealed lab by a Sheldon Cooper type. Does it lack character? Yeah, because it looks like every other MacBook out there, but if the build is this phenomenal, I don't think anyone would mind. The chassis is rigid and the screen has hardly any flex. It feels like an absolute unit, dense and unyielding. I also love how Apple gets the clamshell design just right. Something as simple as the hinge resistance and the weight of the bottom half is so perfectly dialed in that every single Mac I've used has passed the one finger open test with flying colors. But it's not just the outer shell that's stellar. Almost every major component you interact with is top of its class. The Retina display isn't 4K, but it's punchy, bright, and features good viewing angles for an IPS panel. Now, would I have liked to see a 4K OLED screen like those living in high-end Windows laptops? Yeah, sure. But did I really miss it in my day-to-day usage with the MacBook Pro 16? Not really. The Retina display is a really nice screen. Then there's the trackpad, and the rumors are true. The trackpad is phenomenal on the MacBook Pro 16. It's definitely the best that I've used on a laptop, and it's so big that you could probably play an entire board game on it. Interfacing with it is still a little bit weird to me, but that's got more to do with Mac OS than the hardware. But is it really so good that you won't ever need a mouse with your MacBook? No, I wouldn't go that far. You just have so much more agency with a mouse, and the lack of a touchscreen interface doesn't help the MacBook's no mouse case. What I probably couldn't live without on the MacBook Pro 16 are the speakers. When I say it's the best speakers I've ever heard on a laptop, I mean that by a country mile. Now, I haven't heard those on the Razer Blade Pro yet, so I can't really compare how it stacks up there, but against everything else, even the big gaming rigs, yeah, these sound better. It's fuller, more balanced, and more like a proper speaker setup. It's just phenomenal, and I just wish that more Windows machines had speakers like these. On top of that amazing hardware, the MacBook Pro 16 is also so quintessentially Apple in the same way that the iPhone is, because it just works so well with every other Apple device in the ecosystem. AirDrop, for example, works like a charm in our workflow. We shoot a lot of video on iPhones, so being able to quickly offload it to the laptop without faffing about with like a cable is just awesome. And how has nobody else thought of Sidecar? Like, seriously, it's bad enough that Apple has the best tablets in the market with their line of iPads, but now you're telling me that they can instantly double as a secondary display on the go? In retrospect, it seems like such an obvious idea, but I have yet to see anyone else execute it in the way that Apple does. Sure, it's not a perfect solution, but with my 10.5-inch iPad Air, I get a display that's just big enough that I can dump all the stuff that I want to keep an eye on, but I don't really want cluttering up my main display, in an instant. It's so awesome, and I just can't get over how useful this feature is. What's more, if you have an Apple Watch, you've got an easy way to secure and unlock your MacBook with Auto Unlock. And if you have an iPhone and you get a FaceTime call or an iMessage, your laptop rings too. Like, it just works, and that's thanks to something called continuity. Plus, it goes even deeper than that. You can use your iPhone to scan a document and have it appear on your Mac. You can instantly connect to your iPhone's hotspot without needing to enter a password. You can also have access to a universal clipboard so that you can copy text on one device and then just paste it in another. It's quite incredible how much you can do with this feature, and none of them really feel shoehorned in the way that something like Huawei's Huawei Share sticker does. Everything feels well thought out and properly executed in this regard. But inevitably, while the magical aura around the hardware and ecosystem really elevated the MacBook Pro in my eyes, what I quickly realized that I probably could never live with was macOS. Now, before you start writing angry comments down below, I will concede that macOS is really well optimized for its hardware. It works really well on the MacBook the way iOS works really well on an iPhone, but in a lot of ways, it is equally as frustrating. I've always had problems with multitasking on the iPhone, and what I was surprised to find out was that I would have those same issues on the MacBook. Simple things often felt overly complicated to me, and I just couldn't understand why they had to be done this way. For example, I'm someone who almost always writes in split screen. I have reference material on one screen and then my documents on the other. It just makes sense. On Windows 10, all I needed to do was pull the window that I wanted to snap to the corner of the display, and then it would just pop in place. Then I could simply select the other window I wanted it snapped with, and then that falls into place too. But then I go and try and do that on Mac, and I find out that I need to do it on a different desktop altogether. The quickest way I found was to enable full screen on one window and then go back to the home screen and then drag the second window over to the first full screen that I created before it snapped into place. Fine, I guess that's just how it works in Mac world, but then when I tried to go and drag a photo from the Explorer app Finder into one of my snapped windows, I find out that I can't have a third floating window in my snapped window desktop? So I had to go back to my main window, grab the photo from Finder, and then switch back to the full screen snapped window and drop it in there. Now imagine doing that with multiple full screen desktops active. Like, I now fully understand why whenever I see like a Mac user do stuff, they just have like a whole bunch of windows scattered all around their main desktop. Also, why is the File Explorer app called Finder but then the search function called Spotlight? Like, wouldn't it make more sense to use Finder to find things? And that's just the main issue that I had with it. There's also a whole bunch of little things that drive me over the edge. Stuff like the time, wireless signals, battery statuses, and other critical information being hidden when you're using a full screen window. Like, I'm not watching a video in full screen or anything, like, why do you need to hide the time? File management is also something that Mac users will swear by, but I personally prefer the Windows solution because my folders will align to grid and auto-arrange themselves in Explorer by default. Oh, and if I were to double-click to open a photo in the Windows Photo Viewer, I can then just scroll through every other photo in that folder without needing to close or open another application. On macOS, the only way I can do that is that I need to change the way images are viewed in Finder before I can start scrolling through it. Like, why? It just messes up the whole view in Finder for no reason. But I think as far as interfacing goes, the biggest missed opportunity for Mac OS is the absence of a touchscreen input. Looking at those beautiful icons on the home screen reminded me so much of iPadOS, which is basically Apple's interpretation of like a touchscreen computer. It also doesn't help that Launchpad on Mac OS looks like a screen full of app icons on an iPad. Windows has a horrible layout for touch in this regard, but on macOS, it just seems to make sense to have the ability to tap on those nice big icons. But all I have instead is Touch Bar, which is just a huge waste of time. It's pretty obviously a gimmick, and I think even Apple knows that, because with the MacBook Pro 16, they had to bring back the physical escape key. Why? Because almost nothing on Touch Bar is ever where you expect it to be in any app. Controls move around all the time, and sometimes a control that executes a function is not always in the same place in other applications. It's just not productive in my experience, especially if you're on non-Apple apps. That being said, I already know that arguing Mac OS versus Windows is the same as arguing iOS versus Android. It's completely pointless, and die-hard fans on either side will argue their side until their dying breath. And I have no intention of starting any of that. The only reason I'm bringing all this up is so that existing Windows users who are thinking about switching to MacBook can get a little bit of a heads up. So let's just leave it at that, because I want to move on to some of the tweaks that I noticed Apple has made to their new 16-inch MacBook Pro over its 15-inch predecessor. Now, my editor Zach uses the previous gen 15-inch MacBook Pro, and the two main issues he's been facing have been with heat dissipation and the keyboard. With the MacBook Pro 16, Apple has departed from their problematic butterfly key switches and opted for a new Magic Keyboard. I think that this is the right move with regards to reliability, but I'm just not that big a fan of this keyboard. I think I may be the only person in the world who actually prefers the butterfly key switches, because I love the tactile bump that it has. It's a short travel, sure, but it's just so satisfyingly clicky. Of course, this new one has good travel and almost no key wobble, but it just isn't satisfying enough to me. However, I think that Apple has definitely made the right move, because this one should be far more reliable in the long run. I was, however, a little bit disappointed with the way heat dissipated on the MacBook Pro 16, because I thought that Apple would have figured out a fix to the sweaty palm syndrome that has always plagued portable laptops. But no, the deck where your palms rest still gets really hot and your hands will get uncomfortable after prolonged use. You know, something you expect pros to do. That being said, this 16-inch model doesn't thermal throttle the way that our 15-inch model does, so I guess cooling has been improved here. Now though, we need to address the elephant in the room, and that's the price. Everyone knows that when you buy a MacBook, you're going to be paying a premium. The Apple tax, or whatever it is that you want to call it, prevents the company from competing in the same performance per ringgit metric as the other Windows machines are able to. Our unit here, with an Intel Core i9, a 1TB SSD, 16GB of RAM, and an AMD Radeon Pro 5500M, will set you back a whopping 12,199 ringgit. And even if you want an entry-level model, you'll still have to fork up at least 10,499 ringgit. And it's powerful for sure, but if you're editing on Premiere Pro like we are, I'd wager that a similarly spec'd Windows machine with NVIDIA GPUs will give you a similar, if not better, experience for less money. But you're not buying a MacBook Pro just for raw performance per ringgit. You're also paying for the amazing speakers, the incredible build, and if you've got an iPhone or iPad, how well it works with the other stuff in the Apple ecosystem. For me, I guess the perfect laptop would be a combination of the phenomenal hardware on the MacBook Pro with all the convenient productivity things that I love from Windows. But that machine doesn't exist yet, at least I haven't found it. So for now, to answer the question that we posed earlier in this video, no, I don't think that the MacBook is the perfect utopia that all sort of laptop users should move to, and for this particular long-time Windows user, I definitely won't be making the switch. But I can definitely see how a Windows user with a different workflow than mine might actually prefer macOS over Windows. Amin, for example, has made the switch to a MacBook Air and he hasn't looked back since. He says that the interface is designed in a way that makes it easier to focus on one task at a time instead of jumping from window to window. Of course, his workflow isn't quite as multitask heavy as mine and mostly consists of looking at documents, decks, spreadsheets, and emails. But you know, those are my thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think of the Mac OS, the MacBook Pro 16, and whatever it is about laptops that you want to talk about. You know, I'd love to hear them in the comments below, so make sure you leave one there. But for this video, this is where I'm going to end it. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the notification bell icon so that you'll be informed whenever we post a brand new video. You can also like us on Facebook, but our home will always be at soyachinchao.com. In the meantime, everybody, please stay safe and take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!